2 minutes.
You guys are live.
We're live. Much better. Chief. 10 o'clock?
You got it, sir.
I'll meet you there.
Awesome.
I am. I got permission. Good. Well, here's my half hour. We'll start. Well, Michelle's in the manager's office, so. Michelle just went into the
Good, I hope so.
She's not gonna be.
I hope so. All right. If we could call to order the meeting, 4:30.
Counselor Dowdle?
Here.
Counselor Kelly?
Here.
Counselor, sorry, Hensel?
Here. As long as you didn't say
Chief
you'll come.
Wallace?
Here.
Chief Ritter?
Here.
And Mr. McMahon was asked to be excused. It's at this portion of the meeting, we'd ask any individuals who are members of the audience if they'd like to come forward and present any public comments that might pertain to public safety. If you could come up, if there is someone, if you could come up to the mic and speak. And
Sure.
thank you.
So I have a question about cats in the city. I'm concerned about 23 Tom Miller Road, and I'm wondering if we can strengthen the laws regarding cats. I have cats in my yard. I have cats around my property that look very unhealthy. In fact, one of my neighbors adopted a little kitten last year that was born, and the kitten was really sick. It didn't even live past 6 months. At 23 Tom Miller Road, there's food left out in the open, so really any animal can come by and eat this food. It's been an ongoing problem. In the summertime, there's cats that are fighting in the backyard. I've seen cats with injuries, and at any one time, there's probably 8 or 9 or 10 cats coming to this 23 Tom Miller Road feeding and having more kittens. And I've got so many, it's very upsetting. I have feces in my yard. They use my mulch piles for their litter boxes. A couple of years ago, I had a dog and a cat, and they both came down with a really bad case of fleas. And I do think it was related to this situation. And I was a very responsible animal owner, and vaccinated my animals, but yet they still got fleas. So it's very, very frustrating. I will say that we have worked with the city police, and we've worked with the building code enforcer, and they've been very, very good. They've come to the house several times. They've had to try to help this individual. They have made some headway, but I really think there's more headway to be made on the situation. It also impacts the neighbors behind us in their homes, and a few years ago, we brought a letter to the city council, and a lot of our neighbors had signed it, kind of reiterating a lot of these concerns that I have today. So there's that concern for 23 Tom Miller Road, and my other concern for 23 Tom Miller Road is that there's an accumulation of garbage in the front of the house. And I'm wondering if there's any ordinances or laws on the books about garbage in the front of your house, you know? So those are my concerns today.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Will there be others speaking of the same topic that I could address these at the same time or individually or at the best I can?
Yes, yeah, my neighbor lives behind us, and he's gonna come forth and say a few words.
Okay, all right, thank you, thank you.
I don't have anything prepared, but I did just want to sort of confirm some of the things that she's describing. We've lived there for about 2.5 years now, and the cat situation is just utterly out of hand, and we're not sure what we can do about it. There are, on a given day in our backyard, we have a tall fence all around it, but on a given day in the backyard, in the summer, we may have 6, 8 cats walking around. They get terribly wounded in cat fights with one another. You can hear them screeching and fighting with one another at night. They're very unhealthy, and we have fleas in the backyard and the grass. It's a concern for us with our children. The amount of feces and so on is also a serious concern for us. And mainly the cats are not looked after or cared for. We're concerned about it as a public health concern, and we're also concerned about it just from the standpoint of the safety of both children and animals in the neighborhood. And so I just want to express that it's been a serious concern for a while. If there's anything that the council can do to assist with the situation, we really appreciate it.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who cares to speak on? Okay, right up.
I'm Peg Whipple. I live down the street from Ansel's, and my issue is an animal issue. It happens to be the skunk family. Here's my issue. The only way you get rid of them is to trap them. It's gotten to the point where it's $40 a trap. And we are, the last bill was $388.80. The guy comes and does the job, he's really good at it, but it's gone up. Price-wise, it's now $60 a trap. So every night, there's a trap set, and there's either 1 to 2 animals in it, usually skunks. Now and then you get an opossum, but they aren't what bugs me. The skunks have dug up the lawn to the point where the whole lawn needs to just be redone. And I don't know how you stop them. The only way you catch them is to use a trap, and it's about $40 to $50 an animal when you're in the trap. He does come, he does take the trap. I don't know what he does with them, I don't care. They're gone, and then he just replaces the trap. But each trap has gotten up to now $40 to $50.
Can I ask?
The last bill was, well, here's $388.80.
Can I ask you, do you believe there's a connection to your issue of skunks with 24 Tom Miller?
With what?
With 24 Tom Miller? 23
Oh,
rather?
no
Do you think
doubt.
there's a feeding?
No doubt.
Okay.
Because
all
I
right.
don't know how they get into my yard, except going across Tom Miller Road.
Okay. But do you think their food source is present?
There's only grubs in
Right.
my yard.
But food that's left out for cats?
Oh, I don't know anything
Okay.
about that, because
Okay.
I don't have that in my
Okay.
particular yard.
Okay. All right, so we'll
all I
separate the
know
two
is
issues.
What I'm dealing with
Okay.
is opossums and skunks and,
And you have contacted because the city does have a
Nuisance.
nuisance officer.
I've talked to whoever will listen to me. I don't know what else I can do.
But the city doesn't
The
contract.
city, here we go again. The city has one man, I guess, who will, always offers every year to do the skunk issue for free. And I don't want to be derogatory about him, but he really doesn't know what he's doing. So he comes with a thing like this, that's the size of this, and he never catches anything. And he brings some lettuce, but it doesn't do anything. The other guy who, at least what he does, is what he sets up works. And usually every night you got a skunk.
This is the one that you pay for privately. Okay, because the other individual, I think we're talking about the same person, is contracted and paid to provide the service.
Well, he brings a container about the size of this, puts lettuce in it, and catches nothing. At least, I think if they were going to do that, if the city's going to do it, they need to get the proper track, because it certainly works every day in my yard. All you do is just put some peanut butter in it and a mushroom, and or a marshmallow, and in they go. But the little thing that he used, and he's used it every year, it just doesn't catch him.
Okay.
So,
All right.
I don't know what to do. I'm gonna have to get a job pretty soon, even though I'm retired, because skunks are expensive, and I don't know what else to do.
Would you become our skunk person? It sounds like you've got some good expertise in it, actually. Or help
The
us find,
skunk
this has
person?
I
actually
don't know what
been,
to tell you, because I am just so, I don't think anything.
It's overwhelming.
It is, it's
Yeah.
overwhelming, because they don't know what else to do.
And I
Yeah.
think it's a situation and a problem that's not just limited to
That's
your
right.
neighborhood. I think it's
No,
prevalent
it's-
throughout the
It's-
city.
Yeah, what did he tell me? There were 25 skunks from downtown that they caught, or killed, or, let's see. Raccoons, opossums, skunks, woodchucks, down in the city, supposedly, this is in your little area here. They caught 25 skunks.
Wow.
He took 25 skunks out.
And this is the men
This
that
is
we're not
John-
contracted with.
Yes.
right, Mr. Burgess?
No, this is Phillips.
Right, this
He's
is
the one who knows what he's doing, Phillips.
Oh, okay,
So we go with Mr. Burgess, don't we, Chief?
I don't
Yes.
know who he is.
right.
Yes.
All I know is that's the only
Alarming
one that I
difference,
had that has the traps that catch
Right.
something.
Mhm.
difference in results.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I think it is a larger issue that
It
we
is, it's
need
a
to
big
look at
issue. Yeah.
as far as
I don't think that
Law
you
or-
realize, even down here, I mean, when it was 25 something skunks he caught, they got big. So, I don't know, I am definitely here because I will do whatever you want me to do. I don't know what else to do. The trapping does work when it's done correctly, but it's a hassle and it's done every year and almost every day, except when it's winter.
thank you.
All right.
Thanks.
Thank you,
I-
Peg.
I feel better, I don't know.
No, this,
I got it off my chest.
Well, does everybody have your email address or, a way to contact?
I'm on 12 Meadowvale.
Okay.
I live right down the street from the business.
Okay.
Okay. Well, is there anyone else?
I haven't had a skunk.
Is there anyone else who'd care to comment?
Oh, you have other
Everywhere.
problems.
Well, if we can just address, first of all, the cat issue. We did a local law amendment back in 2015 about feeding, intentionally feeding animals. And cats were then brought into the conversation. They were taken out of the conversation. Mostly because there were a lot of activists who spoke out against not feeding them. However, it became discretionary. If you leave a dish of food out for a cat, I don't know how the skunk and the raccoon and the opossum, you can't put a sign out for cats only. So I don't know how you would discourage them. And so it's been an ongoing problem. And I've heard the same complaints in many, many locations throughout the city, repeatedly. Some have volunteered to feed the cats, remove the food. But when you have a feeding source, it feeds them all, whether you're a skunk, a cat. I know the Clinton County Environmental Department has a law on the books, but I don't know if it's enforced, because I have referred some of my constituents to that office because there is a health concern. I provided them applications to fill out, and they have yet to give me any feedback on any results. I assume
had
it's
a
not
similar
successful,
situation.
because I'm familiar with the ones in my ward, and it seems to be ongoing because there's dishes all over. It may be time to revisit that issue and reintroduce feeding nuisance animals to include feeding cats, or at least some type of controlled feeding. You put something out, you take it back in, because this is, I think, where it's all coming from. There's a food source, and we've had experts speak on that as well, if there's a food source, and that's what brings them in. So there may be something we may be looking, or we could actually parallel to the Clinton County Health Department. Since they don't enforce it, maybe if we had it, we could enforce it. Those are just some ideas to act on.
So is there anything we can do as, is there anything else I can do besides come here today and?
Well, further discussion would take place to actually create another amendment to the local law to include feedings. you know, once you have somebody that's determined to do such, to beat that determination would involve a lot of enforcement.
Well, and it's, I'll tell you, the police were very good, and the building code office has been wonderful. We've been having this problem for about 5 years now.
Mhm.
And it really, and I know there are other areas of the city too, where
Oh, yes.
there's a lot of feral cat populations. So.
Yes, and as explained to me by the health department, if somebody is feeding the cats, they are responsible for their vaccinations.
Right.
That becomes a matter
And
of
then if they are
enforcement.
picked up for a trap, neuter, release, there has to be efforts made to find the owner. If somebody's feeding them, they are the owner. So if they are removed someone's property, then they are considered the owner. I don't imagine they're assuming that responsibility. I could be wrong. But if you've got that many to be assuming vaccinations and care for them. So this is something we'll probably discuss and reintroduce. And thank you for bringing it to our attention. It's been brought to our attention. It's just, it needs more attention to include.
I guess my question regarding the skunk issue is, and I guess Chief Ritter, this would go to, do you have an idea of how many responses Mr. Burgess has for skunks and other, and what his success rate is?
Off
for
the top
catching?
of my head, I couldn't answer that.
Mhm.
Well, what I was told is it was 25 skunks in the city that were caught.
Okay, that's with the gentleman that you've contracted, that you've hired
Mr.
on your
Phillips.
own,
That
Mr.
I was
Phillips.
told.
So I
I
guess
said I
I'm
wasn't-
wondering if, as a city, or as a, perhaps we should maybe contact or reach out to this gentleman that
He knows
Mrs.
what
Whipple
he's
is
doing.
using and maybe
I don't want to lose.
utilize his,
Right.
Yeah.
He
You
knows
know,
what he's doing.
this came up before we let out the last budget and had to re-up the same arrangement essentially for this year as we had for last year. And there's some concern about whether some of these issues are being addressed. Maybe if you had a few citizens who could sit down and identify the various needs and concerns, it's not just skunks, but it's also cats and feral cats, et cetera. It's a bigger issue. We've only got, I think, what was it, somewhere around $20,000 devoted to solving this. It may be that that's inadequate, or maybe it's not being spent in the ways that leverage it the most. And I think we could all use some advice on maybe how to repartition that and do it in a little bit different way.
Yeah, but it seems to me like just getting the statistics about the current officer and what his success rate is and so forth, the numbers that he's been dealing with, might also just be a pretty rudimentary way of comparing performance.
We don't have
and I mean, and I personally would
for
say
this person.
if we as a city are contracting out to this gentleman and there isn't a success rate.
That's right.
And our citizens are,
We just
are
have to
being
prove it.
forced to
That's right.
to pay that money out of their own pocket, then there's a problem.
But the
We don't
contractors have
have-
put out to bid the contract, or,
I'd have to look.
okay.
We don't have any performance expectations, so the proper thing to do would be to do an RFP and invite anyone to bid, not just Mr. Burgess. I think,
Well,
I don't want to say this for sure, but possibly we renewed with him year after year just because it's convenient.
Yeah.
And so maybe it's time to broaden our scope a little and look for,
I
look
certainly
for-
would appreciate the council's input.
and also to come up with some performance expectations for whoever we choose, be it Mr. Burgess or anyone else. Because, you know, right now he's not expected to trap a number of animals every year. Or,
I don't believe there is any
Yeah.
expectations
No.
stated.
we should look at that.
What happens to the animals that are captured?
He takes them, he puts them in
Burgess.
the back.
No,
we're talking
about Mr. Burgess.
Oh,
I'm curious as to whoever you hired as well. Are they euthanized as well?
pardon?
Because you didn't know and you didn't care.
What?
What happens to the animals that Mr. Phillips
Oh,
traps?
I don't know what he does with them. This is what's nice about it. He picks, when somebody's caught, skunk, possum, whatever it is, he just picks up the whole thing that they're caught in, and slides it on the back of his truck, and off he goes. I don't know where he goes.
Okay.
I don't really wanna know. But, I don't know what it is. But I'll tell you what, his truck is full of animals and parts and whatever. Oh, yeah, you know, you could.
Anyone else? All right, well, thank you for your input.
Thank you very much.
Yes,
Thank you.
all right. If we can move on to reports for department representatives and discussion with counselors. Number one would be the ambulance replacement. Chief, if you'd like to comment on your situation with that.
We've got the 2003 ambulance that will not pass New York State inspection. It's not just New York State inspection, it goes into Department of Health inspection. We have a 2019 in the capital project we have it slotted for replacement. It's a 6-month build time, so I'm just gonna need or may need to move it up a little bit. I don't know how we go about doing that.
So it was the 03 that was intended to be replaced? Is that
Yes.
what the target was, the 03 vehicle? All right. So to move that out of 19 into this year with
I
the
don't know if
6?
that's possible. I would like to. It's gonna take me 6 months for delivery, and at that time.
What's your total fleet right now of ambulances, including the ones that
I
are?
have 3 ambulances.
And the condition of those are?
We have the new one that was bought
Right.
2 years ago that's in very good shape. 03 won't pass inspection, and the 2007 is in rough shape also, but we're able to still use it.
All right. So if the 07 went out of service, you get the 03 out of service?
Then the 07 would go into the 03 spot, and we would have the 2 other ambulances for first and second call.
Okay. But if the 07 was to go out of service, then you had the
07
03 out of
was out
service?
I only have 1 ambulance.
Right.
If it went, I can't, it's oil changes, things like that, any preventive maintenance, we have no ambulance for the city.
Okay. Then what do we do?
I work on it through the mutual aid system.
Okay. Does that include
Which is
CV?
lost revenue.
Right.
Right, it's lost revenue.
We only run one ambulance, right?
We run 1, there are times, as of today, we ran 2 due to an increased workload.
So that does happen.
Everybody in the area getting inundated with calls at once.
Is it pretty typical for an ambulance company to have a spare or 2
Absolutely.
spares?
Yes.
Okay, so you need that vehicle
Yes.
then.
Is this the oldest of the fleet?
This is the oldest.
So can we get some guidance on that, perhaps, Mr. Marks? How do we
What's the question?
put the 2019 ambulance cost into this year?
Have to revise the capital expenditure budget plan.
And that's a 6-month billing?
So it's 6-month build time, when I talk to the manufacturer.
All right,
It's when you order as to when you will get delivered.
okay. So
We're
we're
just making a
almost,
council resolution to
right,
revise the budget.
right, okay. Okay. Thank you. If we could discuss overtime costs today, just quickly, with each department.
All right, currently we are 31% through 2018. The equivalent amount of money that would be, at this point in the year, we're at about 39%. So that equates to roughly $18,000 over for this point in the year.
Okay. So we're at 31.
31% through the year, but it would be 39% as it,
Of the overtime budget.
the dollar amount
Okay,
of the budgeted overtime.
all right.
How does the overtime amount fluctuate like throughout the year? Is it higher and low?
So, excellent question. The amount is largely out of our control because we respond to calls for service. There are some portions of overtime, like special events, where we can predict the amount, but largely our overtime budget is based on the demand. Certain major level incidences or staffing levels that drop down below the demand for calls for service on a daily basis.
But I imagine it's like higher in the summer would be my guess, because there's more events going on, like Mayor's Cup or things like that.
So I guess generally speaking, yes, it does do this. But as I look back back to 2011, the yearly amount does fluctuate. There are some years where we're $50,000 over at the end of the year, and there are some years where we're $20,000 under. So it's hard to predict, but I would say it does kind of fluctuate over the year.
Typically, the summer months is a higher,
Because those are the
activities
the
and-
predicted overtime with the special events.
Is the overtime prognosis looking better due to the council's position on, I know I can think back to Josh's discussion with the woman on the Take Back the Night, on parades like that. We're asking people to stay on sidewalks so we don't have to have as many police officers present to cover overtime, to cover those events. Is overtime seen a drop? Is it more cost effective since the council's been taking those positions?
So what I would say to that is an incident or an event like that is something that we do not predict. We predict the special events, the Mayor's Cup, Battle of Plattsburgh, those type of events, and we can kind of predict how much it will cost, and that's basically rolled into the yearly budget for overtime. Events like this, we do not anticipate, so the council's position does assist us in keeping those costs as low as reasonably possible.
But are most of your overtime costs associated to the opioid situation?
So I would say that is one of the heavier demands on our overtime budget, is because of just the work hours associated with those investigations.
Right.
They're very labor intensive.
And that would certainly create the fluctuation depending
I would believe so.
day to day, I would think. Okay.
Yes.
All right, all right. And the fire department?
We're at 42%, we're a little higher than expected. I have 2 retirements, and they had to use some vacation. So that drove it. I've had several injuries, so people, qualifications, not being qualified to fill certain positions.
Okay.
That affected it also.
Okay, then we can turn that right into staffing. I know you both had retirements, promotions, things creating openings. So where are we at with that?
So staffing, I'll just go through our vacant positions. We have 3 vacant lieutenant positions. Two are the more high profile, that myself and Captain Q are vacated.
Right.
Those would be absolutely essential lieutenant positions. We have 3 vacant patrol officer positions, 2 vacant detective positions, vacant dispatcher position. We also, so those are sworn but non-sworn, that acts sometimes in the capacity. A police officer could also sit the desk, but we have dispatchers who cost less and can perform the same function. The civilian staff we lost a systems administrator position, which was we're a very technology heavy department, and the ability to have that person in-house does have a savings.
So what's the status of that opening right now?
Still unfilled.
Pending anything?
Pending an able-bodied person
Okay.
or further discussion.
Is there a search on, or is it
Not
gone that far?
currently.
Okay. And Chief Lawler?
We have 2 captains that are retiring as of the 30th. I also have a resignation that will be effective the 5th, so that will put me down 4 positions.
Okay. Is that resignation, could you disclose what the title is?
I was a firefighter. That was for personal reasons.
Okay.
It was not discipline. It's something that needs to be, with us with our staffing, is also academy days that we can put people in to get them trained. There's one coming up in July, so further discussion on filling those positions is needed.
Thank you. And we'll move on to the role of the consultant with the Public Safety Committee. Has there been any meetings, discussion, any of that sorted out? It's going to involve your departments plus the building inspector?
I did meet with he and Joe McMahon related to some, some future goals that we have, parking issues, and also code enforcement, and how we can manage those effectively.
Okay. And while we're on parking, I noticed in the Parking Violations Bureau, the tickets issued March 2018. Well, let's go to 17 first. It was 82. This year, there's 179.
So
What's going on? I mean, we're only into...
So that very much like our overtime budget does fluctuate, and it's I would say in the early months, opposite of the overtime budget in the summer. During the winter months where we see the massive fluctuations, it's largely dependent on a snow event, where we would issue a lot of tickets for park on the street or in the parking lot for snow removal.
Okay, so I mean, we're only... All right, well, thank you. And will you be meeting with the public safety consultant as well, with the fire
I'm
department?
sure, I've had several phone conversations with them, but no sit-down meetings yet.
So that's pretty much underway and getting organized. Okay, right. And we'll ask Police Chief to give us a brief update on the ongoing discussions with the Plattsburgh City School District, exploring options and feasibility of placing an officer in the school. That was discussed at, I believe, the last board meeting, wasn't it?
It was. There was a lot of discussion, actually. So, per the superintendent of schools and the school board, they have identified that they would like to do what is best for the security of the schools. And they've identified a couple of areas where they would like to focus those efforts, and one is auditing and assessing the infrastructure of the schools, the school security, if you will. Another area that they want to focus on is having an officer actually in the schools.
That's one officer that goes to each school, or
Each
one
school
officer?
or one permanent?
So, great point. They have yet to finalize the number. They just have identified that they would like an officer or officers in the school system to be, we're still in the very early stages of exploring this idea, whether it would be dedicated to one building or spread out over all the buildings. We haven't really found out the best way.
Would this differ from a resource officer? Would this be a security? Because a resource officer is security, partly, yes, but...
So, I mean, that's something of the name of what it would actually be titled. We currently have a juvenile officer who works cooperatively with the schools, but doesn't work directly for the schools. So this would be more of the model of working directly for the schools versus someone that is a police officer from the Plattsburgh Police Department, full-time paid, that responds to things that relate to the school. They would want somebody dedicated to the school. And I believe they're looking more towards, and again, very early stage of this, someone who's retired that has the training and experience and would be at a lesser cost.
Okay.
We still haven't gotten through a lot of those details.
Now I'm sure there's going to be a lot of details.
Yes.
Why do they want a police officer? What's the need?
So it really goes to the national discussion of a lot of school districts they're engaging in the discussion of, do schools need armed police officers or an armed officer in the schools to better secure the schools? So I don't think that the Plattsburgh City School District is saying that's absolutely what they want, but they are trying to decide if something like that would be beneficial for the school system. But that's the reason for it.
So the idea is that this is in the realm of the discussion on school shootings?
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to item 3, I see we're at our time limitation. Do we want to continue discussion, or?
Please, if you complete the meeting, I think we don't have much to do in work session.
Okay. It's just 3 items, and these are requests for training for the police department as well as the fire department, and they are as presented. Any questions from anyone?
I move that we accept them as written.
All right. Your second?
That would be you.
There you are. Okay. Any old business to discuss? Oh, roll call, I'm sorry.
No, just all in.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any old business for discussion? Any new business for discussion?
Yes, I have
All right.
some questions. We are down 4 people in the fire department.
Yes, sir.
Now you reported. And I can't talk about this a lot because it's in litigation, but we're trying to give ourselves a better position as far as staffing and have more flexibility. Do you see yourself filling these positions or leaving them open?
I see myself filling them.
Filling all 4 of them?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then we have 2 police officers positions who are open. Do you see yourself filling those, or do you prefer to keep them open?
For the film.
Okay. Can you explain why?
So that goes into a much larger discussion, but realistically, our department has experienced a departure of senior officers in the last 5 years. And the level of experience, it is not looking towards the future. So realistically, we want to get officers in that they can build that experience so they're proficient at the point where the senior officers that are remaining, we only have 2 officers, 2 detectives that are past retirement age at this point. And if we were to lose them, which we probably will, our department will be without 24 and 25 years of experience and 14 each as a detective. And that goes to how quickly major crimes are solved. So getting officers to fill vacant positions is important in my mind.
Okay.
Chief, I guess earlier you said that right now you have 3 vacant lieutenants, which 2 you categorized as being essential, 3 vacant patrol, and 2 detectives plus a dispatcher. That looks like, to me, 8 positions, 9 positions, if you include the 3rd lieutenant that you have vacant. I guess my question to you is, what is the impact these vacancies have on public safety?
So they do have an impact on public safety. We respond to calls for service, and we do not get to dictate the level or the amount of calls or the nature of the calls that we respond to. So, we take years of data of the level of calls and try to predict what adequate staffing would be to provide that public safety service to not only the residents of the city of Plattsburgh and the people that visit the city of Plattsburgh.
So would you say if the patrol positions and the detective positions and what these vacant positions weren't filled, that there is some jeopardy to public safety.
I would say that, yes.
And it would mean more overtime, I bet.
You're absolutely correct.
So let me ask, the 3 detective openings are present? 3 the detective openings, there's 3 presently open, or we have 3 detectives?
3 vacancies.
3 vacancies.
That have just not gone filled.
All right, and 2 possibly pending. Okay.
I mean, that's speculative on my
Right,
part, but
right, but.
I can't imagine with 24 and 25 years that they're looking to stay for
Right.
another time.
Okay. All right. Good. So I'll ask Chief Lawless, you have 2 captains retiring.
Yes.
How many does that leave?
2.
2 left,
Right.
and then there's those 2 and you. And there's nobody in between,
Yeah.
because you don't have an assistant or a battalion. Battalion, okay. All right, thank you.
I would fill those captain's positions by moving firefighters or lieutenants up, fill from the bottom. But then I would have to fill in my 4 that I'm requesting would actually be entry-level firefighters.
Right.
So there would be a cost savings as far as that is salary. We start at the lower rate.
And there's a civil service list for all these items we're talking about for,
Yes.
to fill, so they don't have to be created and list developed, and, okay, all right, thank you. Anyone else with new business?
Chief, you might add that your academy begins in June of this year, a little bit earlier than in past years.
That's right.
Hearing none other, can we call for a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
So, second? Roll call?
Counselor Kelly?
Yes.
Counselor Dowdle?
Yes. Okay.
So concluding, let's begin the work session. This is an opportunity for us to have extended discussion on any of the items on the agenda before our official meeting begins at 5:30 for the Common Council. Do you think people would like to further discuss? You've already discussed in your committee meeting a few of the agenda items.
If I could ask Chief, Fire Chief, one question. Will we be resuming reports from your department?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm sorry, what was that question?
We used to, we were receiving reports when they had full-time, it was based on the full-time clerical staffing, all right? Then it went to part-time, so during that transition, we were receiving reports for calls, and it was quite a breakdown of what they were. And I've asked them if we can start resuming those.
Okay. We can do that.
All right. Good.
The only really other item on the agenda is a relatively routine approval of the grant money for CDBG grant. If you have any questions of those, Matt does have an answer for you. Would any of the councilors like to offer any business or councilor reports this time?
I'll just mention that on Saturday, May 5th, there'll be a ceremony which the council approved, naming the Little League at Penfield Park, the Hector Duquette Little League Field, and there'll be it's opening day for the Little League, and they're planning on having a nice ceremony prior to the opening of the game, opening of the season. So would love to have a big turnout.
Any other counselors like to offer any reports at this time?
Crickets.
I believe on May 4th, over at SUNY Plattsburgh, they're setting up a roundtable discussion to discuss cryptocurrency. Me and Councilor Kelly do plan on it, right? Yeah. We do plan on attending. My availability is going to depend on court, but I do think I will be able to attend, so I'm looking forward to that.
I don't think they've set a time or.
No, they haven't set a time yet. And I told them the later in the afternoon, the better for me. But they are looking to have some sort of roundtable discussion. They've reached out to us there, so we're looking forward to that.
I just had one thing that I was gonna say during our meeting, but I didn't get a chance if I can have the opportunity.
You bet.
Go ahead.
So it was in the status of our department. I just wanted to highlight one of the officers that had an idea from long ago. Our department, I think it was in 2000, participated in a gun buyback program. It was offered by the state. He approached me a couple months ago about it, looking to explore that opportunity again. He reached out and the state was on board with it, so he met with the Attorney General's office, I believe, just this week. And the Attorney General's office is going to support a gun buyback day here in Plattsburgh.
Fabulous.
And a little bit about it, it's, I'll talk more about it once we have a date set and publicize it, but it really is an amnesty program. It's not to take guns away from people, but it is an opportunity for people to do what's right and not be penalized for it. So.
Are there other programs similar around the state, Chief, where other cities have similar?
So in talking with the Attorney General's office, they do this mostly in the southern part of the state, but they're more than happy to accommodate us. So.
Thank the officer for initiating this.
Corporal?
Okay.
I have one other, tomorrow I've been asked by Ken Kennelly from Plattsburgh State. We're going to be meeting. He reached out to me, and I believe he spoke with you, Mayor, about reconvening or at least trying to get together some people, or at least starting with the two of us. I guess it was previously referred to as Town Gown Committee to improve the relationships between the college and the city and residents and so on. So I'll be meeting with Ken tomorrow to kind of get an idea of what exactly the college is looking for or hoping to set up in that regard.
Excellent. And the campus is not at all at odds with the city and some of the things we want to accomplish. We want safe housing for their students, and we want orderly conduct of their ambassadors when they're downtown in their downtown core. These are things that the city and the university are completely 100% aligned on. Now we can figure out some ways to do it. I think that the president will share with you two large binders of recommendations that the previous committee had produced about 5 years ago. Many of them are excellent recommendations and we haven't followed through. So I'd like to renew that effort and thank you for being willing to participate. As you know, we have a windows project that's ongoing. Senator Little still remains very interested in having that move forward, and will do whatever she can to figure out a way to have the remaining windows funded as well. This is the 100th anniversary of this building, and we should take a lot of pride in this building and do some sprucing up, starting with the windows, of course. So hopefully we'll have a little bit more movement to report on that very, very soon. You know, this council's been meeting for over 100 years, and 100 years in this building. In 1918, this building was completed at a cost, by the way, of about $200,000, which is ironic because our estimate for the windows project is somewhere around, what, $750,000, $746,000? About 3 or 4 times more than the cost of the building originally, and that's just to do the windows, but we'll figure out how to piece that together. But this is, the Common Council is an amazing institution, and when I see some of the things that have brought us down as a group and caused us to not work very well together, I think that we need to address them squarely and in an upfront manner. Some members of this council a few years ago passed a new charter, which I think was a great charter. We should be very proud of it, but I don't think we've been applying it as carefully as it was intended. I would like to have you all consider a code of conduct, a policy for the city council, the staff, the mayor's office as well. I've looked at other code of conducts that have been passed by other cities and municipalities, both in New York and beyond. And I think it's high time for us to adhere to a code of conduct for ourselves as well. That will also address some of the concerns that I've brought up in asking for an ethics board to also oversee some of the things that we do, just to make sure that the public maintains its trust in us and we all work together as effectively as possible. So I'd like to today introduce this as for initial consideration, have you all work on it. I'd like to have it or something else accepted by you as soon as we possibly can, so we can get really on to the effort of working together in the best interest of our taxpayers. I think that's what they expect, and I think they need to expect more from us than we've been giving them in the recent past. So hopefully this is one step towards that, and I hope that it'll have your very serious consideration in ways that you can either adopt this or substitute this with something else that you think is equally valuable. But this one really addresses many of my concerns on issues of cooperation, integrity, ethics, etc. This, by the way, as I said, doesn't apply only to councilors of the mayor's office, it goes citywide through all the various staff and employees as well. So I do hope we'll have your serious consideration, and I hope we can have some more discussion on that.
But this isn't in lieu of an ethics board, is it? Or is this?
I think an ethics board would be some of the teeth that would be associated with a code of conduct. So the ethics board has to have something, some set of principles to enforce and protect. So I think it begins with the code of conduct, and the ethics board you can then write in as the group that essentially administers it.
And what is it we're not giving the taxpayers?
You know, what I think the taxpayers want to read in the front of the newspapers and hear about from the news is all the really amazing things that the city council and the mayor's office and the employees are working together to make this city a really wonderful place to live. Unfortunately, often what's in the news isn't that, but other things. So I'd like to get it back to that, to the things that we are doing to make the budget more sustainable, ensure that our employees are recognized for the great work that they're doing, recognize that we're, for instance, adopting new strategies on how to deal with opioids, or how to deal with broken windows theory to reduce those areas in the city that can act as magnets for crime. The fire department is doing some incredible things with regard to their ambulance service collection that should be recognized. The DPW is doing really smart things within a different approach to repairing streets that will allow them to probably rebuild many more miles of streets than we've done in the past. Those are the things we should be focusing on. But we tend to not focus on those because we're brought down by other less important things or other dramas that seem to be attracting the public's attention. I like to have the public have confidence that we're really doing the work for the taxpayers. And I think it will begin with the code of conduct where we carefully understand our responsibilities to the public. So I think it's a good reminder.
So it's on them.
No, of course it's not on them. If we're going to not give them the goods, and if we're going to instead engage in behavior that might sell newspapers, they're going to write about it. We have to figure out how to cooperate as a council to produce those really positive stories that they can write about. And I don't think we've been doing that to the level our voters and taxpayers expect. Do you?
Do I?
Do you agree?
Partly. Good news doesn't sell.
Well, sure it does.
Well, it does.
It just gets drowned out by bad news
But
sometimes.
good news is not reported because there's more good news than there is bad news. That's just my take on the media.
Say that again, Jeff.
Good news, there's more good news than bad news. So
Yeah.
if you're exposed to good news all the time, you're not apt to read it because it's part of it. But bad news is what gets your attention. It's just my take.
Well, we can be comforted that we're going to have challenges in creating a more sustainable city that they can write about. This can be difficult. Looking back at some of the decisions that we've had to make in the last year and a half, they're absolutely gut-wrenching for every one of us. And those challenges will continue. So we'll continue to have those stories for the newspapers to write about. So let's do it in the spirit of cooperation, because we're all in this trying to serve the same taxpayers. Any other issues for the work session? Got a few more minutes, maybe a little bit of an update on progress of the DRI. Matt, would you be able to come and let us know where the parking study stands, et cetera? I know there's been lots of questions in the public.
Yeah, the parking program, we are continuing to discuss what form that will take. And that will be an evolving discussion over the next couple of months. For the streetscape and riverfront access project, setting up interviews with the highest scoring submittals to that RFP for next week. The individual grant program for downtown business owners, the council last week approved technical services for environmental and architectural work. Official notice letters have been sent out to all of the firms who submitted, and we should be starting negotiations with them on agreements and rates very soon. The signage and branding RFP went out this week. And the Durkee and Dock Street RFPs were due today, and we're going to work on those moving forward, even though there was a small number of responses.
Just a question about the parking program. That seems to be the hot topic at this point. That's going to be needing a person to run it, correct?
That's yet to
I
be
don't know.
determined, but the discussion we've been having most recently is, as you know, there has not been a parking enforcement officer for a couple of years now. And it was the consensus of this group a few weeks ago that we should move on filling that position because it generates the revenue to pay for the position as well as allows us to manage downtown parking. So we had a greater discussion earlier this afternoon on trying to figure out the way to do that. Our legal counsel believes there'll be a small tweak in the local law that will be necessary to enable us to do that. And he's currently working on it. So hopefully by next week we can have that worked out.
And that was
And
going
we'll
to be,
also have to go through civil service.
It'll be a civil service
is
position.
that the threefold position we discussed? It would be sidewalks, code, and parking.
Right. We anticipate it wouldn't be a full-fledged code enforcement officer, but somebody who could help us with parking and sidewalks and other minor code enforcement things of that nature.
Right, and then the person for the actual parking system that would collect the fines, maintain the meters, maintain the kiosks, collect the, all that involves another person, correct?
Could be, it's gonna be very dependent on the technology we adopt. I imagine in the days when we used to have parking meters, that would be a very labor-intensive thing. Now with kiosks and smartphones and all those sorts of things, it may not. So we'll have to figure out what the best technology is and then determine what the staffing level will be that's associated.
But there will be a staffing level?
It might be the case that an existing parking enforcement person could take care of much of that.
And if it's not, would civil service then have to create a job title? And how much time would that take, if we get to that point?
Not long. It doesn't, if there's a legitimate need for a new title that simply can't be met with the existing
Right.
choice, they can be pretty responsive. Some of the difficulties are in, that take longer, are in when we need to take an existing civil service position and modify it somewhat. That is much more difficult because it has an effect on who's written the exam for that past, who would be qualified, going through that list, so that can be relatively time consuming.
But would it, if we had that under code enforcement, such as with the parking enforcement, working under the building inspector's office and also having other responsibilities within the building inspector's office, would that be in some way recreating a job, or are there jobs that exist that with a similar
We
kind
haven't
of?
found one yet. We don't need the same level of expertise as a full-fledged code enforcement officer, and we haven't found an intermediate one yet, so we may need to have to create it.
Which would potentially delay the start of this?
It may. We're looking into that right now. We'll probably know a lot more next couple of days. Yeah, by the way, the other approach you all may take with regard to downtown parking is have some sort of parking authority that's contracted out to do those duties, and other communities have done that. I'm sure Mr. Forrester can make some recommendations for what he feels is going to work best for us.
Well, I think Mr. Forster was definitely suggesting something along those lines.
I didn't get the
that-
contracting out piece.
No, I didn't
No,
either.
not
No,
contract,
he
but definitely some-
suggested perhaps a board being formed that would develop the policies and then hiring
Person,
a person.
if not 1.5.
Yeah, and I think what he was suggesting would require some resolutions to change the code, because he was suggesting that to be more flexible, the parking authority would have the powers to set regulations, so that the council's not setting certain
Right.
regulations
That was-
for whether
it was-
changing price or changing
Yeah.
certain
Fine
parking.
structure.
That was my understanding about the function of the board.
The board
Yeah.
of directors,
Yeah.
right.
Anything else? If not, let's begin the meeting. Call meeting to order for the common council. And we begin with the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please.
Mayor Reed,
Present.
Counselor Armstrong.
Here.
Counselor Kelly.
Here.
Counselor Dowdle.
Here.
Counselor Ensel.
Here.
Counselor McFarland.
Here.
Counselor Kretzer.
This evening, I'd like to begin by recognizing somebody that's been a wonderful service to the city of Plattsburgh for many, many years. This certificate of recognition goes to Mr. Ron Noland, whereas Ron Noland has served the community as a member of the Zoning Board of Appeals since July of 1999. Whereas Ron began serving as chair of the Zoning Board of Appeals in 2003 and has continuously remained in that position for 15 years. Whereas Ron works tirelessly to help applicants submit their best and most complete applications, always making himself available to meet with the building inspector's office and the applicants not only before their first appearances, but often in between adjournments of their appeals. Whereas Ron has always taken a proactive role in recruiting residents from all of our city to provide the most balanced and broad-based perspective possible on matters that come for the Zoning Board of Appeals. Now therefore, be resolved that I, Colin Reed, Mayor of the City of Plattsburgh, on behalf of the entire council, do hereby tender to Ron Nolan a certificate of public recognition extending our deep appreciation for his distinguished service on the Zoning Board of Appeals. We wish him success in all future endeavors and are grateful that we still have the benefit of his position as chair of the Zoning Board of Appeals. In witness thereof, I hereto set my hand and cause the official seal of the City of Plattsburgh to be affixed. And Ron, please come up and say a few words for us.
Look on the projector.
And for the folks at home,
Hey.
congratulations. Please say a few words.
I will say something. I did go down to the New York Planning Federation, who gave me the David Ali Award as Outstanding Zoning Chair in the state of New York. We just went down the other day, and I had to say a few words there. I do like zoning, and I do think it's very important. And John Clute, when he recruited me, I came to the zoning board meeting, he said, more important than the council, more important than the planning board, more important than any other board in the city, the zoning board affects and controls the quality of life in the city of Plattsburgh. And you should be on it because you know construction. And Clyde Rabbit, who appointed me, I've been really fortunate to work with great boards since '99, and we've done a lot of stuff. We've streamlined the process. I think we take pretty good care of the city. At the quality of life, we allow development, we encourage development, we like responsible growth. It's a very hard balance to keep. We never make everybody happy, but we strive to. I'm enjoying it. I'm honored to be able to do it and represent our city. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Resolved that the minutes of the regular meeting of the Common Council held on April 19th, 2018 are approved and placed on file among the public records of the city clerk's office.
Moved by Councilor Ensel and seconded by Councilor Armstrong. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed.
Resolved that the payrolls of the various departments of the city of Plattsburgh for the week ending April 25th, 2018 in the amount of $433,693.67 are authorized and allowed, and the mayor and the city clerk are hereby empowered and directed to sign warrants drawn on the city chamberlain for the payment thereof.
Moved by Councilor Kelly and seconded by Councilor Armstrong. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed. Are there any other additional reports that councilors would like to make? I'd like to begin with Councilor Armstrong on behalf of Councilor Kretzler for governance strategy and city operations.
There are a number of things that we're considering to put on next week's agenda for our committee meeting, but we're meeting with Brian Brayton and representative from Munis tomorrow. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, goodness. Thank you. Okay, I'm speechless. Anyway, I'll tell you all the rest of it later.
Certainly there's an awful lot of the planning with regard to the DRI and the parking that is going
Yes.
through your committee. So
Right.
you're doing some incredible work right now. Thank you. Councilor Ensel of City Infrastructure?
Really don't have anything at this time. Our next meeting is scheduled for Thursday, May 10th. And at that point, I'm sure we'll have some items for discussion.
Thank you. Finance and Budget, Councilor Kelly?
This is the time of year when we do our 5-year plan update. It'll be really our first 5-year plan update as a council. We did our first 5-year plan last year, and I would like to schedule a meeting after each council meeting for the month of May. The charter says we must pass our 5-year budget, our budget plan by June 1st. So if we meet for after each council meeting for just a brief time, I think it won't be too difficult to to make the changes we need to make to the 5-year plan. So is that acceptable to the members of the council? To have a brief meeting after each?
How many minutes will it be?
I'm looking for 15.
Okay.
We're gonna break this up into small little chunks and,
Yeah.
and make decisions on those chunks and then see what that does to the whole budget plan. And then we'll be able to vote on that June 1st.
That's fine, Mike. I think the next week, right after the meeting, we're planning on having the MLD board meeting.
Okay, okay.
If you want to go after that.
We can do that. It will be short, I promise.
It's fine with me.
Okay.
Next month, we'll also have a 5th Thursday. As you know, you meet your committees every Thursday. There's an extra meeting 4 times every year. If you'd like to use that additional time for a budget hearing at 4:30, that'd be welcome.
That would be a good time to put the finishing touches on this before we bring it up as a resolution. Good idea.
Anything else on budget? Councilor Dowdle, Public Safety.
Sure. Well, we just went through it, so I'll just do a quick recap. We had a few individuals tonight present their concerns about nuisance animals and possibly the control of such. We heard about the ambulance replacement from the chief and the need for such to move it possibly into this year as opposed to next year. Overtime cost to date, they're pretty much on target from what we heard. Staffing, there are concerns with retirement, empty positions, resignations, and all. Overall department updates, we heard, we also touched upon animal control, parking violations, the opiate situation. We discussed the role of the consultant that's coming on board on a contracted basis. Apparently the chief and police chief and the building inspector and the fire chief is yet to meet. That's underway. And Police Chief Ritter gave us an ongoing discussion of the Plattsburgh City School District exploring options of placing an officer in the school. And that's what I got.
Thank you. Councilor Armstrong, Village Public Library.
I'll offer that report next week.
And MLD, Councilor McFarland.
Yes, we're doing a second meeting since I've been on the board next Thursday. There'll be 3 items on the agenda then. Other than that, as I said in the during the working session, there's an upcoming roundtable discussion on the cryptocurrency issue. That will be at SUNY Plattsburgh. Time's not exactly set yet, but it's the talks are to have it on May 4th.
Thank you. Resolved that the reports as listed are hereby ordered received and any written reports are placed on file among the public records of the city clerk's office. Moved by Councilor Ensel and second by Councilor Dowdle. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed. No correspondence at this time.
Resolved that the bills lodged by the Common Council for the week ending April 27th, 2018 in the amount of $2,602,688.93 are authorized and allowed, and the mayor and the city clerk are hereby authorized and directed to sign warrants drawn on the city chamberlain for the payment thereof.
Moved by Councilor Armstrong, second by Councilor Kelly. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed. This is an opportunity for the public to please come forward and address the council on any issues of mutual concern that are on the agenda. There will be another public comment period for other issues of mutual concern at the end of the meeting. Seeing none, this can continue.
Authorizing release of bid documents for New York State CDBG project number 927PF141-16 elevator replacement project in partnership with the Plattsburgh Housing Authority. Excuse me. Whereas the state has awarded the city of Plattsburgh grantee a New York State Community Development Block New York State CDBG grant for the above referenced project in the amount of $300,000. Whereas the City of Plattsburgh Common Council approved the above subject project at their meeting on January 5th, 2017. Now therefore, the City of Plattsburgh Common Council duly convened does hereby resolve that the mayor of the City of Plattsburgh be and is hereby authorized to release completed bid drawings and bid specs for the project.
Moved by Councilor Armstrong, second by Councilor Dowdle. Discussion? Roll call.
Councilor Armstrong?
Yes.
Councilor Kelly?
Yes.
Councilor Dowdle?
Yes.
Councilor Ensel?
Yes.
Councilor McFarland?
Yes.
Resolved in accordance with the request, therefore the Common Council approves 2 police department employees to attend active threat integrated response course training from June 11th to 13th, 2018 in Oriskany, New York. The total cost should not exceed $382.50 and will be expensed out of the asset forfeiture fund.
Moved by Counselor Ansel, second by Counselor Dowdle. Discussion? Roll call?
Counselor Armstrong?
Yes.
Counselor Kelly?
Yes.
Counselor Dowdle?
Yes.
Counselor Ensel?
Yes.
Counselor McFarland?
Yes.
Resolved in accordance with the request, therefore the Common Council approves Fire Chief Scott Wallace to attend quality improvement through accreditation from April 30th through May 3rd, 2018 in Rochester, New York. The total cost should not exceed $1,250.
Moved by Counselor Armstrong, second by Counselor Dowdle. Discussion?
Just one quick question. That money is budgeted already,
Yes.
Chief?
What is quality improvement through accreditation?
It's a way of doing risk assessment for the community, work on community risk reduction, best practices.
Any further discussion? Roll call?
Counselor Armstrong?
Yes.
Counselor Kelly?
Yes.
Counselor Dowdle?
Yes.
Counselor Ensel?
Yes.
Counselor McFarland?
Yes.
Resolved in accordance with the request, therefore the Common Council approves one police department employee to attend TASER instructor course training from September 30th through October 2nd, 2018 in Syracuse, New York. The total cost should not exceed $822.50 and will be expensed out of the asset forfeiture fund.
Moved by Counselor Dowdle, second by Counselor McFarland. Discussion?
Just a quick question, Chief. Do our officers currently use tasers, or do they do? Okay.
And this would be for someone to go to TASER instructor course and then come back and train everyone else in the department?
So yearly, every TASER user needs to be certified on a yearly basis. Without an instructor, we can't maintain the level of certification. So that's the reason for an instructor. I was the instructor. I am no longer the instructor. That's the reason.
Okay.
Is this something academy members are exposed to as well?
Not traditionally. It's put on by the department.
So if there isn't training, you just can't tase anyone, is that it?
Right.
You need to be certified through the instructor.
Any further questions? Roll call?
Counselor Armstrong?
Yes.
Counselor Kelly?
Yes.
Counselor Dowdle?
Yes.
Counselor Ensel?
Yes.
Counselor McFarland?
Yes.
I've put before you a code of conduct that I'd like you to consider for a subsequent resolution. Please consider it carefully and either adopt it sometime, I hope, or rewrite it, but I think that the time is right for us to do this. We also do want to put together an employee handbook, something also that the city doesn't have, which of course obviously a code of conduct would be an important element of that employee handbook, and we'll begin to start working on that right away as well. Any other resolutions or items for initial consideration? Any new business or additional council reports? Councilor Dowdle?
I'd like to ask the status of the promotions and special events coordinator position. Is that being looked at to be filled? Or how is that going?
Yes,
Mr.
we
Miller?
conducted 2 interviews. We are currently working with civil service to make sure that the candidate that we would like to hire is going to meet their standards. I hope to have an answer on that within the next few days, and if it's in the affirmative, I will make an offer and we'll make an announcement.
Are these candidates on a list
Yes,
from civil service?
yes.
So this is from the last test where, because I think they updated in 2014 the events coordinator title.
It's from the most recent test.
Right, okay, so they're off the list. So the specs are in place. We're not looking to modify them, as we said earlier.
No.
Okay.
Each time that a new hire is made, we are able to change the weighting somewhat for what we want to emphasize. Once we do that, there may be some modifications in doing more of one thing and less of another, but it's based on the same job description.
And the rule with civil service, if you have less than, do we have to hire one of the 2, or do we need to have 3 applicants?
In this case, there's a number of people on
Yeah,
the
I believe
list.
there's 8 or 9 people on the list. If we choose from the top 3, we don't need to do any further communication with the rest of the list, is my understanding.
So are all 8 applicants been contacted, or just the top 3? Do we know that?
At this point, only the top 3 have been contacted.
Okay, and then the 2 that you referenced are in part of the top 3?
Correct.
Okay. Yep.
We're hopeful that by next time the council meets, we can let you know the result of that search. Any other new business or council reports at this time?
Yes. I read an editorial in the Press Republican today that I don't know if my colleagues got to see it or not, but I thought I'd share with you a couple of excerpts from it. The PR editorial today was titled "Big Payoffs in New Jersey, What About Here?" I think. For years, some employee contracts across the nation have included a provision by which workers are able to accumulate small fortunes by collecting pay for unused sick time. In public contracts anyway, this seems an unfair burden on taxpayers. The question, I'm not reading the whole thing, just excerpts from it. It's in today's paper if you want to read it. The question in this time of municipal, state, federal, and school budget turmoil is whether this is too costly a benefit to put into tax-paid contracts. What is sick time? It is a benefit that protects workers' income in case they have to miss time because of illness. In a recent case in Rahway, New Jersey, Fire Chief William Young Jr. was arrested for driving under the influence after narrowly missing a bus and a wall. He was relieved of his duties and shortly thereafter retired. Upon his retirement, he was given $160,000 owed him in unused sick time. That set of circumstances rankled many, but it shouldn't have. Young had the money coming because a contract arranged decades earlier. And then it ends by saying when contract negotiations come up, public employers should take a hard look at such generosity. And when I read this, the thought occurred to me that we have that issue right here in our own city. We have sick time or sick leave buyouts that are really costing the city a lot of money. We paid one last year for $120,000, I think. And we paid one so far this year, the largest one, $64,000. And that amount will climb to over $100,000 for this year for the total number of retirees. So we must ask ourselves the question why. If I remember correctly, it cost $66,000 to pave Prospect Avenue last year. Is that right? $66,000. With $120,000 sick leave payout, we could have paved 2 Prospect Avenues. We could have, for what we're going to pay this year in sick leave buyout, we could pave 2 more Prospect Avenues. So we obviously have a difficult challenge maintaining our streets. You just have to drive around to see that. But all these payouts for retirees and longevity pay and whatnot, those things, you can't pave streets with that. So we as a council need to take a very hard look at our policy to see what we can do about that. And we need to encourage our department heads to, when they go into to negotiations, to try to take a hard look at that with the union members also. And I would encourage the Press Republican, if this is a topic that you're interested in, go back and see what this has cost the city of Plattsburgh over the years. You would discover that it's probably millions of dollars. So, and millions of dollars will pave lots of streets. So I would ask that you keep that in mind. there's been some discussion also this week about the charter and what our duties are and what the mayor and the department heads' duties are. And with the help of Dean Schneller, I did some research, and I discovered that the definition of our city government is a strong mayor council. And the New York State Department of State Local Government Handbook describes this as the mayor is the chief executive and administrative head of the city, and the council is the policy-making body. The mayor usually has the power to appoint and remove agency heads with or without council confirmation, to prepare the budget, and to exercise broad veto powers over council actions. So that's a definition, according to the New York Department of State, of strong mayor-council form of government. Then from our city charter, it describes a few more things we should know about, should be following, and I don't think we always do. But the council, according to the charter, has the ability to enact, amend, or rescind all local laws, ordinances, and resolutions. We have the ability to establish, alter, consolidate, or abolish city departments, offices, agencies, boards, or commissions. We can confirm mayoral appointments of city officers, department heads, and assistant department heads by 3 affirmative votes. One of our jobs is to prepare a 5-year plan to guide the growth and development of the city. So we'll be working on that soon. The charter says that that must be done by June 1st of each year. We are permitted to establish the salaries, salary schedules, and fringe benefits of all officers and employees of the city. The next section of the charter is prohibitions, and the prohibitions say that neither the Common Council nor any of its members shall in any manner control or demand the appointment or removal of any city administrative officer. That is the purview of the mayor. Duties of the mayor include being chief executive officer of the city. The mayor may authorize any administrative officer subject to the mayor's direction and supervision to exercise these powers with respect to subordinates in that officer's department, office, or agency. The mayor will direct and supervise the administration of all departments, offices, and agencies of the city, except as otherwise provided by this charter or by law. I'll be honest with you, I've never really had a good grip on this separation of duties until I thought about my own job, where separation of duties is a big deal. A person who writes software doesn't promote that software to the production computer system, and there's a real good reason for that. That separation of duties means that there's no chance that the code will be damaged or harmed in any way. The person who writes the code can't take it live. The person who takes it live can't write code. So that's a good separation of duties, and the same separation of duties should be occurring in the Common Council and with city government as well. We should make policy. The mayor and his team of department heads should implement policy, and I think we need to be a little more conscientious about that going forward. Thank you.
You brought up benefits, and I did have encouraged you to look at the benefits package offered our managers with a little bit of liberalization to certainly allow our managers to begin taking vacation as it accrues. Right now, as you know, there's one interpretation that requires them to wait an entire year before being eligible to take a vacation that they've been accruing throughout the year. There is also an issue of a couple of bereavement days, which I'm sure we would all want to grant on a compassionate basis if anyone ever needed it. And then finally, you do understand, it's been brought to your attention that There's different interpretations of what a domestic partner is within the city. It might make sense to align that under one premise for all employees, to treat our managers most fairly there as well. So I've asked you to consider those items, and hopefully you can come up with some sort of resolution on them. I don't think there's tremendous fiscal impact on the city, but there's probably something you do want to explore a little bit, but there's also a matter of fairness in those cases as well.
Whenever we make changes like that, we would hope that we can offset the expense with some savings somewhere else, so we can certainly look at that. Thank you.
So, and I mean, in terms of the work that's been done by the three of you, Councilors Ensel, Dowdle, and Mike, we are going forward with that. I mean, at what stage in the development of considering the best?
I think it's fair to describe to our department heads, since they are the recipients of this.
Oh, I don't
these
mean
changes.
the details of it. I mean just in terms of finishing it
Well,
up.
just in terms of a timeline, we have stopped work on it, at least temporarily. But I do believe that it is time to start that up again. We've had some discussions about morale recently, and I know that morale's not good, and I care about the people who work for the city. And the way to solve that morale problem, I believe, is to go ahead and take action.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of things that are hanging, and that's difficult.
Yes, we've waited far too long, and we've been with far few answers to provide our department heads. We need to do that and do it quickly. As I said in reading the charter, we are the policy-making body. We should move and make this policy just as soon as we possibly can. So, look for a resolution for initial consideration very, very soon.
And you three will meet as a committee?
We can,
And
yes,
before?
if these two gentlemen are still interested in doing so, we certainly will.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Okay.
Any other new business or council reports? This is an opportunity for the public to please come forward and discuss anything of mutual interest with the council. As you do so, state your name and your address, please, and the item you'd like to address.
My name is Danielle Erb. I live here in Plattsburgh. I just wanted to make sure that the council is clear, speaking for strong hands, that we are not against Durkee's development at the Durkee Street lot. I know that has been stated by some publicly, but it's not the case. We just are opposed to the manner in which development is supposed to take place under the DRI, the constraints of the DRI. And we feel that as the public voted for the money to go towards the development of the waterfront by the currently unused lot, that was very popular during the planning process, and that was, the public was wise in choosing that, as it would have less negative impact and a lot of positive impact for the city. I also wanted to, on another note, bring up, I know there's lots of talk about budget and being able to pave the roads and having enough, tax. We have a lot of land that's not on the tax rolls between SUNY and the hospital. And I would urge the council to consider looking into a pilot program for both these institutions. This is actually legislation that's currently being considered. It is, I believe, Senator Seward out of Oneonta has put this forward, and it has been done in other states. Oneonta is actually doing a test program, and they are currently, and actually the last 2 years, have been receiving $200,000 from their SUNY. It's called like the host community pilot program. And I would urge you to support that in any way that you can and look into it. If it does pass, as a host community, Oneonta would be receiving $2.2 million every year. And in other states, it's like, you know, more common for state universities to do a pilot program. A lot of them do so willingly because they do realize that they use a lot of the resources, and that would make a very huge difference here in Plattsburgh. So.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other individuals like to please come address the council?
Mayor, we'd like to say thank you to Councilor Ensel for this.
We'll work on some nice chairs for you too, huh?
Appreciate it.
You didn't carve your initials in it, did you, Joe?
Yeah. Don't give him any names.
Joe was here, yeah.
Used to be a stable.
Are there any other public comments at this time? If not, do I have a motion to adjourn? Moved by Councilor Dow and second by Councilor McFarland. Roll call, please.
Counselor Armstrong?
Are you having a
Yes.
meeting today?
Counselor Kelly?
Yes.
Counselor Dowdle?
Yes, here, yes.
Counselor Ensel?
Yes.
Counselor McFarland?
Yes.
Thank you, folks.
Richard.
Yes. I think so. I think he has some stuff he wants to share.
I'm gonna look at the head clothes up and keep that.
Richard. We still meeting? We still meeting?
Yeah, we should bring in Bob too.
I think I got it.
Just for the seat time. Yeah. We're working with you guys, because he's doing that. Sounds good.